Hello out there, everyone. Welcome to my channel, The Reconverted Catholic. This is CV. As always, I appreciate you stopping by. Today, I have an awesome conversation in store for you, or at least I hope you think so. And something to keep in mind before we dive into this conversation. Here's a thought for you. So if you spend enough time on social media, you may have seen memes or comments on posts or even posts or maybe even outside of social media conversations with friends, family, about creating the best version of yourself, working on the best version of yourself, or that you are now at this point at the best version of yourself, and or still a work in progress with that. Well, what does that all mean? Well, in general, that means self-transformation, right? Self-help, self-growth, okay? Really growing in all areas of life, providing a balance, mind, body, spiritual balance in life, and how it's, portrayed in general in society, that we should keep this, a balance, a sort of harmony in how we live our lives and making the best of them. But what about men? And for the purposes of this video, specifically Catholic men, how are we how are we becoming the best versions of ourselves in our relationship with God, with our family, with friends, with coworkers? How are we fellowshipping with others in our life? How are we helping other Catholic men, our Catholic brothers? How are we helping lift each other up and grow together in our relationship with God and our Savior, Jesus Christ? So, Marco Velasquez, who started a Facebook group called Phoenix Catholic Men, you're welcome to join if you're, of course, here in the Phoenix area, or if you're outside of the Phoenix area and like to network with fellow Catholic men. Definitely join the group. He's put a lot of, he's put some work into it, and is really trying to help grow and help more Catholic men, come together, have more of a brotherhood together, and again, how we help each other become the best versions of ourselves and to each other. Marco has a site called battlerations.com, which goes all into how we can, again, grow together as as individuals, and together as men, again, lifting each other up in our faith and in our relationships and so forth. So Marco and I had a chance to talk about battlerations.com. What is it, the who, what, where, why, and how, and also his short and long-term goals, and also what he's even what he's currently doing too to help really get this off the ground, and hopefully in the process, bring together as many, again, Catholic men as possible, and again, helping each other on this faith journey, including, temptations out there we may face, and how to be strong against those, and how to defend our faith. I know I enjoyed this conversation quite a bit, and again, I hope you do too. And with that, let's jump into the dialogue. Thanks. Okay. Looks like we are live. Hello there, Marco.
How's it going, Chris?
Boy, long time no chat, huh?
Long time no chat, brother.
Yeah, a whole 2 minutes. Let's do. So thanks again for doing this here today. Today we're going to talk about, we'll start with talking with battle rations.
Yeah.
And explain first, of course, some of the basics. What is it?
when did you start it, why, how, the who, what, where, when, why, how, and then we can flesh out from there. So go ahead and start with tell us or more about it, goals too, including your goals for it. So history, how it started, what's happening now, and where you're going with it. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, by the way, for welcoming me to your project and what you're doing here. I think it's awesome, and my eyes are going to bounce back and forth, I think, from the camera to your your frame there.
Where do I look? Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So so thank you again. I think this is exciting, the work that you're doing here. Some of the things I've seen you call out is just some of that interfaith dialogue too, answering some of the more common objections or questions around Catholicism. I think this is just awesome. It's any way that we can use this particular medium, I think is huge, and it can pay massive dividends for the greater kingdom. So Battle Rations. So the Battle Rations itself is very much a brotherhood of Catholic men, where we have an opportunity to dialogue and to share and ultimately strengthen one another with ways to, the tagline for Battle Rations is engage, defend, persist. And the idea is that, the idea behind Battle Rations came several years ago. I was at a local diocesan-sponsored men's conference. And these men's conferences are fairly similar with respect to just the nature and sort of the structure and how they work. And generally what these conferences do is they bring in, the diocese will bring in very influential Catholic men to speak on some element of the faith as it relates to men. And so I was blessed to hear from the likes of, Patrick Madrid, Hector Molina, a couple of very, very well-known priests that travel and do these types of ministries and teachings and so forth. And as I was sitting there at my most recent men's conference, I just had the question, why is it that that we have to wait for an annual experience where these men come forward? And, at the conference itself, there's about 1,500 men. But why do we have to wait for this to happen once a year, where these influential Catholic men can come and share this message and really equip these men in this way? And so as I was thinking about it, my background is in digital marketing. And so part of what I do professionally is, social media marketing, website design, but also video production, audio stuff. And so I prayed about it. And I asked the Lord, how could I help him with this type of effort, is bringing these practical strategies, these practical resources on a far more regular basis, number one, so for more frequent basis. But number two, how do we make it easy to consume regardless of where you are in the world? So not have to wait for an in-person experience that's very centralized and limited in its reach, right? And that's where the idea for Battle Rations came. Now, the name itself, I was looking for a name, right? So I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to start with a podcast. I wanted to start with video and being able to share these strategies. And there were a couple of questions behind that. One is, what do I name this thing, right? And the idea was that I started to think about, I was thinking about Bishop Olmsted, Bishop Thomas J. Olmsted, right? The most reverend. He leads our diocese here in Phoenix. And he had written shortly before a short time before I started Battle Rations, he had written an apostolic exhortation that he called Into the Breach. And it just caught like fire. And it was really just a challenge for men in his diocese to step into the breach, to lead, to band together in brotherhood, take advantage of the sacraments, and really just step up for who they're called to be. And so that idea of soldiers going into battle, that's where it started. And then from there, I thought, those soldiers going to battle, what are they using to sustain themselves to keep moving forward? And so I thought, well, combat rations, right? If anyone who served in the military, they're familiar with this. If you have friends, family who served in the military, there you go, Chris. You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? There's military rations. Now, I don't know if they offer the most flavor, right? I mean, these are very much meal packs designed to give you sustenance during battle, during war, during fighting and combat. And so I figured I sort of changed the name a bit, and I said Battle Rations. So these can very much serve, these experiences served through podcast, through video, they can serve as sustenance for men in the battle. And the second question I had after that was, okay, well, who who do I share? Whose stories, whose experiences, whose strategies can I introduce? And very quickly, the Lord answered me and said, I'll send the influential Catholic men. You just give them the platform and I'll do the rest. And so that's really the idea behind Battle Rations, brother, is bringing influential Catholic men from all walks of life, giving them this platform, and then from there, asking them a series of questions in different ways in which they equip themselves for battle, sharing those with the brothers in the church, and really doing my part to provide that platform and that challenge for men to step into the breach, to step up and engage in battle.
Yeah, so I have a couple of comments already and some questions. One, I love, this is going to sound a little abstract the way I say this, but I love angles, okay, to something to like when you find sort of like a niche of something that is needed, right?
Sure.
How can you bridge a gap, like to your point? Okay, instead of a yearly conference or something where you're waiting, for long blocks of time before you can maybe fellowship more or write, as like, for example, as Catholic men, that we can become more plugged in to each other's lives and our faith and grow in our faith journey together. So one, it's really impressive. It is, seriously, because to have that kind of focus and then really want to build this out. I mean, because clearly it is needed. So, and even based on Bishop Olson's document, the Into the Breach, it's funny because I'm actually I have a copy on this sort of little, it's almost like a curio, and it has some shelves in a corner, and I have some books and items. It's funny. I'm actually looking right at it. The second, I was going to make a quick sidebar sort of story about this because I spent some time in the Army Reserves. And so we would have, when we do like field type training or anything where we weren't near a chow hall, we had to have MREs, meals ready to eat. Yeah. So that's kind of, maybe this is one of my quirks. I actually liked some of the MREs, like, what I mean? Sometimes even over the regular meals, like they're just
that's awesome.
Crazy. Yeah. So anyways, a few years ago on a contract assignment I had for work, to keep the story pretty short, one of my coworkers there, he was in the Army Reserves at that time. So, we got to know each other, and then we exchanged some, Army stories or military stories. And because he's still in the reserves, actually, he reports to the National Guard unit there in Phoenix. I think it's Street McDowell around there somewhere. Yeah. So anyway, we somehow got subject to MREs, and I was like, I haven't had them so long, and I miss them actually. Like, so not kidding. Like within that week, he came to work one day with a box of.
That's a good friend.
20 MREs. We actually had an MRE lunch one day.
Nice.
So anyways, it's just funny when you say rations and then, getting some of the context with it, because I was actually a fan. Like,
even better,
right? Yeah. So moving to the questions then too. So first, in helping, bridge some gaps and, really, again, get, us, because part of this, right, what's underlying is to have us, not just networking together, but again, helping each other grow in our, in our faith, right, in our journey.
Yeah.
So how do you, like, for example, what are the ways, or what is one of the ways you're going to help keep that consistent? For example, like, what's an idea for, for example, because one thing, you can establish something and then try to get people on board, and clearly background in marketing, so you may already have some excellent ideas for that, but what is the plan for like keeping that, consistent?
Yeah, well, that's a really good question. So the truth is, I launched Battle Rations several years ago.
Okay.
And when I launched it, I had originally, I would call that, sort of the first inception of it. And when I launched Battle Rations at the time, I had just grand visions of this being something that could grow beyond my wildest dreams, to grow beyond the walls. We always say walls, but the walls of limited, social media access or podcasts or videos, but also reach into things like chapters and recruitment on the local level and those types of things, fraternity affiliation. And I started, and what I realized was, I was about 5-6 episodes in, and I was really enjoying the work and what I was doing. This is a passion of mine. It's not what I do full time by any means. And at the time, my wife and I, we were being blessed with, I want to say our fourth or fifth, we have 6 kids. So, our family was growing. I was making a career change, and I had bitten off far more than I could chew with respect to really just my goals and my vision for Battle Rations. And I use those terms specifically because they were very much mine, my goals, my visions, my objectives. And as a result, I got burned out pretty quick, and I had to let it go. And so I decided this time around, when I relaunched Battle Rations on Ash Wednesday of this year, that I was going to say, okay, here you go, God, this is what I can do for you. I can build a website. I can create the social media profiles. I can work on creating the content, but I can commit to delivering 1 episode per month. And that's all I can commit to right now. And he said, give me what you got. And so with respect to your question around, sustaining these efforts and objectives, there are a few things that I do with Battle Rations. I think that over everything, with respect to how this might be different from maybe other experiences like this, other podcasts, other communities, other brotherhoods, those types of things, is at its core, Battle Rations is about practical strategies, period. Right. I've been on the receiving end of a number of beautiful theological teachings and conversations, beautiful, sort of like up in the sky or up in the clouds, calls to step up as a man, and I think a lot of that has served me well. But the challenge that I found that I wanted to embrace with Battle Rations was keeping it very practical, focusing on things like, as a Catholic man battling in the breach, what are your favorite prayers for when temptation, comes to you? What are those very real things that you do to protect and defend your family from the evil one? What are your favorite sacramentals that you've embraced? What are your favorite prayers, songs, books of inspiration? What are those things that you've picked up and employed that, practically speaking, are relevant for you and help you in your fight, right? So that's really when I think of foundation for what I'm trying to do, that's really what it is that I want this built around, is practicality. Because we as men, there are so many things that we are charged with doing and leading in different ways. And if I were to tell you, Chris, I got to lose a few pounds, you could very much say, you got to eat better, you got to exercise, you got to avoid the soda, cut down on the booze, those types of things. But those are sort of more of those lofty thoughts. But if you were to say, okay, Marco, there's this thing called keto, and with keto, we're going to look at your diet, and this is exactly what you need to be eating for your exercise. Okay. What do you like to do? Okay, well, you don't like to run. All right, so let's talk about using just a set of barbells at home for 15 minutes a day. This is what I want you to start. So you can see where I'm going with this, right? Practical ways to make changes that help you engage in battle. So those are some of the ways I think that this is going to be able to sustain the efforts this time around, is revisiting my approach, putting it in God's hands, number one. Number two, staying very practical with the efforts that we're sharing. And I think that, for most of us men out there, those strategies are something that, truth be told, I've been talking to a number of men now, and every single brother I speak with gives me something new that I'd never considered, challenges me to embrace something that I've never ever thought of. And so those are some of the ways I would say that I'm looking at sustaining these efforts.
Yeah, very nice. That too. So then another question then, what would you say in dialoguing with other Catholic men, right? What would you say are the top, well, I hate to give a number to it, but what would you say are the top few struggles, challenges that men have shared with you in general, as far as what they face and their struggles with, not necessarily, well, it could be temptations too, but have been some of the bigger struggles kind of, through their journey and, growing closer to the relationship with Christ, and just, as including family and their relationships with their partners, if they have partners and so forth.
Yeah, good question. Just recently I've become, and I've really, this Lent, God has blessed me so much with revealing at least a few of the riches of our faith, a few of the riches that if we only stop for just one moment and consider that there's 2,000 years of history
Hmm.
that are behind where we find ourselves today, and we think of the church fathers, we think of the saints, right? And we think of the men who have walked before us. One of the riches that I am so blessed to have encountered this side of heaven is the writings of Venerable Bishop Fulton Sheen.
Mm.
And so to answer your question, that's a good question with respect to what challenges that most men face. I'm reading right now The Life of Christ by Bishop Fulton Sheen. It is mind-blowing. It's like reading poetry. It's like seeing colors I've never seen before. And I'm a cradle Catholic. I'm 41. When I go to mass on Sundays, right? These are the same readings I've been hearing for a number of years. He's breaking down right now. So what he does with this particular book is he explores the life of Christ, and I've made it through his early childhood, and now I'm into the beginning of his ministry. And I'm reading right now of the temptation of Christ in the desert, when he went to the desert after he was baptized for 40 days, right? Obviously, that's what we model Lent after, right? Is that sacrifice that he made. And as I'm reading it, he's breaking down the temptations that Satan tempted Christ with. And it's so beautiful the way he breaks it down, because what he does is he categorizes, and you've probably heard this before with different sermons or homilies, but there's really three different ways in which Satan tempts Christ. And I think those three ways are very much mirrored in the ways that he tempts us as men. So you'll have to forgive me, because I don't know if I remember all three. I remember the three temptations. So clearly there was the loaves, right? Changing the stones into loaves, right, to feed. So there was that idea of hunger, right, physical, requiring sort of physical sustenance, right? And then there was the throw yourself from this mountain, from this cliff, and the angels will catch you. And then the third temptation was revealing all of the kingdoms for which he had been actually given. And so Bishop Fulton Sheen takes these things and he breaks them down to the three categories. And I very much identify with those. When we think of things like those earthly things, those things of this earth, I think a lot of men, when it comes to how they might be tempted, there is that temptation of wealth, of possession, of needing enough. And that also can surface in ways of gluttony, right? That like looking for what I'm consuming, even physically. Am I eating the right things? Am I exercising? Am I drinking the right things? Those types of things. They can offer that sort of worldly pleasure if we allow them to. I think the biggest struggle would be I'll just focus on one of the other ones, and that was the issue of pride. And that's very much when Satan brings our Lord, and shows him all the kingdoms. It's the issue of pride, right? And that manifests itself in so many ways, right? I can do this alone. I don't need anyone else. Or maybe in a flip way, I'm not worthy. It's just an interesting paradigm there that we can find. So those two, and then I would remove our conversation from that story per se, and I'd say certainly sins of the flesh is the proliferation of lustful thoughts, of access to inappropriate materials, and it's just so easy nowadays to access things that just are just cancer to our minds, our hearts, our souls. And I think that those are some of those ways that Satan continues to knock on that door. I think one of the most not beautiful, but one of the most eye-opening epiphanies I had was a friend of mine, Steve Green. He directs an adult faith formation here at the Diocese of Phoenix called the Kino Institute. And he was sharing with me, we were talking about Satan for some reason. We were talking about the passage in scripture where Christ tells Peter and his apostles that they're going to be sifted like wheat. And we were talking about how just the nature of Satan and how Christ actually refers to Satan and says, Satan's come to me. And he's told me what he's planning to do to you and your brothers, but I will pray for you so that after you've essentially finished this trial, you will come out victorious. You come out on top. You'll be able to lead my church, right? I put a lot of words in Jesus' mouth there, so forgive me. But we were talking about Satan and the nature of Satan. And he mentioned a series of books written by C.S. Lewis It's a 3-part sci-fi series. It's escaping me right now, but there's a character in that series that C.S. Lewis very much calls, it's clear that he's the evil one. And he speaks to the nature of Satan and how Satan and his demons do not sleep. They don't sleep. They are the wolf at the door. And I think that's something that should be alarming to us as men, recognizing that our enemy, our ultimate enemy, does not sleep. He does not rest. And with that knowledge, understanding the need, the requirement, the necessity to always be equipped with sacramentals, but equipped in mind, in heart, in body, because the reality is, again, he's the wolf at the door, and all he needs is the smallest opening to make his presence known. By the grace of God, of course, we can win that fight. We can win that battle. Without Christ, we're nothing. But with Christ, we have an opportunity. So that was a long answer to your question, but those are some of the things that I've been reflecting on this Lent.
Yeah, well, those are awesome reflections, and I appreciate that kind. I appreciate that kind of detail too. Because you're really filling out the context of it, which is great. So on the subject of temptation, one of the types of videos or series I've been making, books I recommend. Okay.
Yeah.
Mostly, by Catholic authors or Catholic Christian related books, theological related books. So one I did recently, Scott Hahn's, it's called The Father Who Keeps His Promises. And in my video about that, I also have blog versions of the videos too, like written blogs too. But I mentioned that, there's that our first major choice, okay, as humans, right? Decision. Live under God's will, in the Garden of Eden, right? Live according to God's will, or try to become gods ourselves.
Yeah.
Right? And it was this ultimate act of entitlement. Now, this is a word that's used quite a bit these days. You hear it a lot. Or, this person's entitled, or they just seem really entitled, or even generations are entitled.
Sure.
Really heavy in this, what's in it for me? What can I gain from this? And these are all precursors to accepting temptation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Falling into it. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd like to get your thoughts on this then, right? Knowing that, right, that we're kind of right now a little bit sort of strangled in an entitlement culture. Okay. A lot of what I've called, rights and privileges versus responsibility, personal responsibility, which is something that really is part of what you're doing here too, is it's embedded in that, right? Being more responsible to each other, to our families, to our relationship with God, and so forth. So on that note, my question for you is how, in reaching out to other men, and again, and dialoguing and working through our challenges and avoiding temptation, right? What are some ways that we can avoid that trap of entitlement? You know what I mean? And hopefully trying to keep this also from getting a little too abstract, you know what I mean? Because you can unpack a lot with that. But again, having this focus of, what's in it for me? What can I gain from this? What can I benefit from this? Like, what can we do in having conversations to show that we need to move this more outward and not, directed to us?
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
What I'll say is that probably was in the way I was raised, that I'm Mexican American, right? I'm Mexican, and so my culture
Yeah.
my culture does not allow for a lot of feeling sorry for yourself, right? I mean, there was none of that, because for Mexican culture, it's always about the family. It's never a self-centered experience, and that's true with how we approach everything from children to the elderly. It's very much, it's about the family. With respect to how that influences how I live today, I'll tell you this, that with respect to that issue of entitlement, there's not a day that goes by that I don't thank our Lord, half a dozen times at least, for the blessings and the grace and the gifts that he's given me, that I'm completely unworthy of. And so I would say that for us as men, it's important that we understand that we are entirely unworthy of the gifts that we have. And those gifts range everything from the opportunity to open your eyes in the morning, the opportunity to see and feel the sun's warmth, to the opportunity to use our hands, our legs, our feet, our arms, the gifts of love and friendship around us, recognizing every time we wake up from a comfortable bed that itself is a gift. And so my challenge to men, and my challenge to this to any generation or group that does have that sense of entitlement, is to recognize that everything is a gift. Everyone in your life is a gift. And so I think it can be easy at times, especially the time that we're living in, with respect to our political environment, with respect to the influences that are all around us, to feel as though we are entitled to certain things. But to recognize that everything is a gift from the Creator. Everything is a gift from God. My intelligence, the fact that I'm able to speak to you right now in this moment with this laptop, with this microphone, this is all a gift from our Heavenly Father. And so, when it comes to conversations with Catholic men, that's how I would lead the conversation. I think I mentioned earlier, there's a distinction to be made, is that, oftentimes I think that, there's a time and a place for mortification, right? There's a time and a place for recognizing that we are just mere ants compared to the beauty, the radiance, the glory of God and His majesty. But I think it's also important to remember that even though that's who we are in comparison to our Lord, that we are His chosen, we are His called. And He looks at us, He looks upon us and smiles and says, "You are my son." And that's something that we need to recognize and remember as well, right? That we are His son. I think of the story of the prodigal son, and for those men out there that might either be feeling entitled or might not feel as though they have been blessed or favored or called apart, to recognize that the very life you have is a gift, and everything that comes from that life, be it suffering or be it a true blessing, is a gift to be taken and very much consumed and acted upon by our Father.
Yeah, very nice. That's it. Yeah, I absolutely agree with, gratitude. That has to be there. That has to be, a staple everyday foundation, and, being thankful, right? And showing appreciation, in fact, I once read about love, a definition of love, even if you want to say in a more secular sense, is bringing out the best in each other, right? Lifting each other up, appreciating each other, being thankful, So so here's another observation. Okay. And I'm actually thinking about I've been thinking a lot about this, doing a video on this, a blog and a video on some of the parallels between, so I'm single. Okay. Some parallels of the single world in life with building a relationship, with God. And it's this, okay, is that I see a lot of what I want and what I need and what I don't want. Okay.
Yeah.
And then it's interesting, when I did some time back, I put myself out there actually to, maybe meet somebody or
Sure.
happens. And, so I asked this one question to many people, right. And, of course, the women I met and tried to date is, what do you bring to a relationship? What do you offer? Because that seems to be very much missing in the language, in the conversation. And it does carry over to pretty much every other part of life. Like, we can talk all day long about what we don't like, what we want, what we don't want, and so forth too. But how are we providing for each other and taking care, of each other? So that's what I'm also curious about, like how we can get our communication, right, more towards, or even just how we conduct ourselves, about what can I do for you? How can I help you? How can I show you that I'm here, to be responsible to you? And And then of course that can, sort of chain reaction, right? Radiate to, other areas of your life that now you're going to be, whether it be with your children, for example, or, a job or whatnot, that you're having, more of this focus, which sounds like, as far as what you're putting together with Battle Rations here, yeah, it sounds to me all around, or in general, of how can we become better men, right? But then how we can serve with that, right? Really reach out and show what we have to offer the world, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, it makes me think of, I remember there was a priest several years ago, and he would just deliver these. He had married several of our friends at a certain time, and so we got to hear, the pretty standard wedding homily, right, over and over again. He was so beautiful the way he would share this homily, and what he would always challenge the couple that was in front of them. He would look to the woman, he'd look to the bride and say, your job from this moment, from here on out, is to get him to heaven. And then he'd look at the groom and say, and then look at the bride and say, and your job, speaking of the groom, is to get her to heaven. And so when you talk about, yeah, when you talk about relationships and you talk about that idea of service, of sacrifice, I'll admit, those aren't sexy words, right? Serving others, sacrificing for others, laying down your life for others. Those aren't provocative terms, right? Those aren't appealing terms right out the gates. But I will say that I very much have and I think it comes with wisdom and maturity, right, and experience. But I very much take seriously that the relationships in my life, in some way or another, I would love to be at least one of the signs pointing the way, or at the very least, some sort of little marker on the map that says, yeah, this is the right way to go. And there are ways to do that. I think that more and more, the ways to do that are far more in how you choose to live your life and how you can be a witness to Christ in that way. When I tell people, especially in the secular world, when I tell people that I'm married, I've been married for, let's see, April, it'll be 17 years, that we have 6 beautiful children, that we regularly attend our mass, that we are active Catholics. Those things generally come up in conversation, and none of it requires me looking at someone and saying, and if you're Catholic, you're not Catholic, then you don't know Jesus, right?
Yeah.
What I want to do is, and certainly I fall short every single day, right? But what I want to do is, by the way in which I've chosen to live my life in service of someone greater than myself, I hope that looks appealing to you. I hope that in some way you look at me differently and say, there's something different. Like, whatever this guy has, it's different than everybody else. And I hope that that question then encourages you to either ask me, or at the very least, revisit maybe something I shared with you. Because the reality is, brother, you know this as well as I do. In today's day and age, in 2021, having 6 kids, you're either Mexican, which I am, you're Mormon, which I'm not, or you're Catholic. I happen to be 2 out of the 3, right? So most people, when you say, 6 kids, and it is by the grace of God that we've been able to have this beautiful, wonderful family. And I'm certainly not disparaging anyone who doesn't have the size of family we have. I know it's a crazy thing, but when you use, when your life, you've decided to give your life and your talents and your treasures and your love to others, so much so that it's just part of conversations, it's part of who you are, and it surfaces, and it's not something to be embarrassed about, it's not something to be afraid of, it's not something to keep hidden, it's just part of who you are. I pray that can serve as, again, that arrow that leads, or could potentially lead someone to taking that next step in their relationship, or in pursuing Christ, who is always pursuing us.
I like that a lot. I do. That's so. Then on that, this can sound like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? The best question, right? But what are long-term goals then for Battle Rations? What do you see the next year or 2 years? What do you imagine?
Yeah. So if you were to say, all right, Marco, so right now, right this moment, you can do this full time. You're not going to have to worry about the financial aspect of it. We just want, to commit your time to Battle Rations. I'll tell you what, man, where it would start would be to offer a far more regular program or content, right? So several times a week where I'm able to bring different value-based practical episodes and shows to build, strengthen a network across the world with what is the beauty and the richness of the church, right? And challenge these men to step in the breach. From there, I would love the opportunity to build out, and this may very well come, God willing, in 2022, but to actually create a dedicated, exclusive brotherhood that I've toyed around with the idea and the notion of calling the Brotherhood of Valor, and where we actually have an opportunity for men to join, and it be something where I can deliver on even additional value. So things like video-based resources, masterminds, dedicated, monthly or quarterly gatherings, whether those be in person or whether those be, digitally. I'd love the opportunity to partner with some of the phenomenal Catholic artisans out there to produce different sacramentals that I know that I continue to look for in my life that could help me. Those are some of the ways that I think that I would love to see this grow. But ultimately, again, what I want this to do, Battle Rations, is to reach as many men as possible and encourage them to embrace, again, those practical ways to step into the breach, because it's a battle that needs troops. It's a battle that needs soldiers. And the reality is Satan and the enemy, he is far more, he has so many light years ahead of me with respect to how he's infiltrated so many things that are attractive, right? Everything from the media to entertainment to even athletics to professional sports, right? To all of these things that we as men, a lot of us as men enjoy. He's light years ahead of me in that race, ahead of us as Catholic men in that race. And so if I can leverage some of those same tools and resources and empower men, equip men, I think that could very well serve to be just another almost battalion, right, in his larger army, that I would just be so incredibly blessed and humbled to have a small, tiny part in playing in that war. So those are some of those initial things that come to my head. But again, right now, it's all up to God, man. It's all up to God and what he wants me to do with this. But truly, again, this is all about empowering men, equipping them with those practical ways.
Yeah, as you mentioned, you have this passion for it, and it's clear that you do, and I'm really happy to see that you're doing this. Really,
Thanks, brother.
It's so awesome, So speaking of men, gathering and sort of related to some of the goals you mentioned, future goals. So I believe that there is a conference coming up, right?
Yeah, it's a virtual one this year. I believe it's a virtual conference here in the Diocese of Phoenix. So I posted that to our Phoenix, and if you do have Catholic men in Phoenix listening to this, I'd encourage them to check out Phoenix Catholic Men. It's a private Facebook group that we set up. But I believe it's a virtual event this year, just based on the pandemic and so forth. But they're always phenomenal. The speaker lineup is just phenomenal. So I would encourage men, if you can. I know that for a lot of men, finding time on the weekend, especially for a virtual experience, can be kind of tough. But the lineup looks ridiculous last time I checked.
That's great. Yeah. So then, do you think at the conference, or will you by chance have any opportunity? Well, maybe more through conversations with you, but as far as Battle Rations and discussing the two, and what I'm saying, and how you can maybe even become even a more active part of the conferences, or
man, that
I want to ask it.
well, you know what, that is for a number of years before I moved in digital marketing, my forte, believe it or not, my expertise was in adult learning and leadership development. So really? I worked for a large financial organization here in the States, and I was responsible for training everyone from, lower level management to upper level, and then even, C-level executives. I had the opportunity to do some training. So I've had the opportunity to step in front of hundreds and I don't think I ever hit thousands part, but hundreds of people to provide some sort of lesson or teaching or whatever it is. I would love the opportunity to join, an event like that again, if it's God's will. But I think right now my focus is entirely on bringing even men like you, Chris, bringing you to Battle Rations to share your story, because I think one of the challenges, again, and we go back to the in-person or the virtual conferences, those are so brilliant and they bring the most brilliant of minds, but there are thousands, if not millions of men around the world that are taking up arms and who would absolutely be equipped, given a microphone, right, to come and share their stories, share their experiences. And those experiences could very well touch the hearts of other men that they may never meet. So while I would love the opportunity to share the Battle Rations message and our purpose and our mission on a larger stage, I think right now it's just I'm leaving it up to God to see where does he want to take this and what kind of connections like the one we're making right now, what can we make that again provide that sustenance for other men.
Yes, yeah. And it's, we were talking about this earlier about having this platform, right? Like for example, YouTube, where we have channels or we can have podcasts and so and the reach is so much greater, right? This is why one of the many reasons I wanted, I had that dialogue with Keith Nestor from Down to Earth Ministries, had that dialogue with him because he, if you know a little bit of his story, he was a Protestant pastor who converted to Catholicism in 2017. Okay. And he's been since then, like 100 miles an hour, really. So, we were even talking about, being on fire. That mean exactly what you're doing, and he has a rosary crew he does the rosary every single day, not getting it 5 p.m. Central Time. He has now hundreds of people joining just that. He has he has a daily show, feedback, and then he does he calls it unpacking the mass basically every week, weekly mass too. But just one example though of like there are so many channels that have popped up, and YouTube is an empire, right? It's a monster. Sure. Millions of video, billions probably video too. But it's so amazing, incredible. Like I was even telling a instructor of mine for a class I'm taking right now towards I'm trying to finish up a certificate in apologetics, and
wonderful.
So we were talking a little about this recently. I was explaining that I said, we're really, there's so many golden opportunities to get out and reach, people. This message is really important message, and as we know really well. And then you have this awesome angle, right, for men and having us grow, stronger in our faith, a relationship with Christ, with being, men as husbands or boyfriends, whatever, or, fathers, etc., sons, brothers, and so forth.
Yeah, the brotherhood is all Catholic men, single, married, lay people. I have a couple of priests in mind that I'm going to be inviting on the first iteration of the podcast. I had a priest friend join me, and he's brilliant. He's actually, believe it or not, so he's a pastor of, I want to say 2 parishes in Indiana. His name's Father Burns, Dusty Burns, but he goes by Pontifex, and he's an actual rapper. He's an MC, and you can actually find him on Spotify. You just go to Pontifex, Father Pontifex. He's dope. He's amazing. But to your point, speaking of, first of all, I'm with you, dude. I love whenever I can hear these men, especially who've experienced conversion, especially, maybe a little bit later in life, like Scott Hahn, like his conversion story just blows me away. In fact, it was the book you mentioned earlier, A Father Keeps His Promises. I think that was the name, the book you mentioned. That played a huge part of my wife's conversion. So she came into the church. Yeah. And Scott Hahn played a huge influence. But to your other point, and this is a point of gentleman that I'm going to be featuring on Battle Rations here in the near future. There's no excuse today with respect to the number of resources that are available at our fingertips. There's never been a time where the resources, the richness, the beauty, The strategies have been more available and accessible to all of us as Catholic men. So what it is so to your point with the angle of battle rations, again, that's sort of the niche, right? Is the practical strategy. But I don't care if you want to learn about the faith, if you want to learn about our history, if you want to learn about different prayers, the lives of the saints. One of the biggest things for me in my sort of reversion, I never, by the grace of God, I've never left his church. But in one of my recent reversions, it was the idea of the fact that everything that we believe, not only is it reasonable, but it's logical. And there's just so much evidence to support and substantiate the beliefs that we have as Catholics, that if we only opened our eyes to that, did a little bit of reading, watched a couple of YouTube videos, I promise you, any sort of doubts, concerns, reservations anyone who's out there might have will be quickly erased, because with the truth of the church and the reality of Christ, it's not story. This ain't Star Wars. This ain't the Avengers. As great as those series are, right? And I love them to death. This is real. It's all real. I feel almost like Harrison Ford, right? As Han Solo saying, it's all real, right? It's all real. Right. It is. Yeah. And the accessibility we have today is greater than it's ever been. So I'm totally with you.
Yeah, and to think that, as to something you said earlier, that this is now almost 2,000 years that we've had this institution. We've, and to think that, I'm 6 years older than you, I'm 47, and and I think, wow, that's just a drop in the water of this,
no doubt,
massive gift that we've been given. You know what I mean? No doubt. For that to have that kind of staying power, longevity, it just, it can speak volumes in its own way. But let me ask you this as a final question. Sure. What else would you like viewers, anybody watching this, to know, again, about sort of final thoughts about battle rations, and more about maybe participating, or, what you'd like folks to know?
Yeah, well, I would encourage any of your audience, any of your listeners, to first and foremost visit battlerations.com. And if you go to the website, you'll be able to access the podcast. You'll be able to join what I'm calling right now the Brotherhood, and that's our email subscription list. That's where I do things like I reveal to those subscribers who's coming up, what they can expect. They get first access to things like some of the videos that I release, or just snippets of the podcasts. I'll be doing some different promotional giveaways, those types of things, keeping people up to date with those things. But also you can check us, by going there. You can also find all of our social media links, our YouTube page, that kind of stuff. What I would encourage anyone watching this, any Catholic man watching this, to do is just be open to this type of experience. It's different than what you might find with another traditional Catholic experience or podcast, and a lot like your efforts, Chris. Here, it's about having some candid dialogue and conversation. And truly the goal, again, I'll go back to it. The goal with Battle Rations is, again, equipping men. I shared with you earlier, the tagline is engage, defend, persist. We need to first off understand that we need to step into the breach. That's the engage, right? I almost think of that movie Top Gun, right? Where it's like Goose, Maverick, engage, right? Just get into the fight, number one. Number two is recognize your responsibility to defend who and what you love most. That includes obviously our mother church, and that includes your family, that includes those you're responsible and charged with helping lead to heaven. And then finally, it's persist. I think of William Wallace in Braveheart, right? I think of that, just pushing forward despite the odds, despite the obstacles, because the reality is, right now in this world, Satan would have you think that the odds are stacked against us. And in many ways they are. We know who's victorious in the end, but the odds this side of heaven are stacked against us. So engage, defend, persist, keep pace, never give up. And again, I'd encourage all of those Catholic men out there watching and listening to this conversation to check us out. And Chris, I could not thank you enough for this platform. And I love the chance that with this, you and I finally get the chance to even have a conversation and meet. I know you've been active in the Phoenix Catholic Men group, and that's just awesome to see. I pray for you and this project that you're working on, that it continues to produce fruit and grow, because brother, it's so needed. And you are absolutely where you are because he wants you to do this. He's charged you with this. It's up to you to continue to move forward with it, man, because it's going to produce beautiful fruit, I think.
Yeah, and likewise, really, it goes both ways. Yeah, absolutely. I'm really happy to see, as I mentioned before, that, you're on an amazing path, right? Seriously. And you've restarted this journey, right? For Battle Rations, and just that you have such a clear plan for this one. Two, you have that drive, that real passion for it. Sometimes I kind of like teeter on using the word the two, because that also can, get a bit overused, but you do. I mean, you're there. Your love for God is strong in this, and for helping us, I've heard, for example, women say to each other, we need to lift each other up, but it applies to everybody and to men too. And to think that
100%.
you have something that is all about that, us lifting each other up, and to God. Again, a kind of a hats off to you too. It's really awesome, and of course, I'm going to be plugged in it too. I'm sure we'll be in contact. And
Awesome. But yes, I want to get you on. I definitely want to get you on.
yeah, I seriously appreciate this too. So, yeah, thank you again for this. If you don't mind just hanging on for a sec.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, but again, I appreciate this. Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you.